Trust me, I get it. You're feeling the pressure to keep your faith separate from your work, worried that pursuing your God-given dreams might be seen as selfish or misguided. For far too long, we've been held back by a world that tells us that faith and ambition don't mix, that our divinely inspired visions are just wishful thinking. But here's what I've discovered. Our faith isn't a liability in our leadership. As a matter of fact, it's the source of our strength and wisdom. When we fully integrate our leadership with our Christian values, then and only then do we tap into that unshakable divine power. The real challenge is navigating how to boldly pursue our purpose while staying anchored in our faith. And that's exactly what The Beacon Show is all about. Each week, we bring you biblical wisdom and practical strategies from true beacons, Christian leaders who are illuminating the world. And it's also that you can let your light shine brighter and brighter. I'm Tamara Jackson, and this is The Beacon Show. When people whose expertise you trust tell you that your vision is impossible, you have two options: give up or trust God to provide a miracle. Today's guest chose the latter, and his inspiring story will challenge you to step out in faith and pursue your God-given dreams no matter the odds. Aaron Burns is a passionate filmmaker and storyteller who brings directing, producing, and business expertise to his projects. From his very first feature film, made with college savings and donations from family and friends, Aaron has seen God provide in miraculous ways to bring his visions to life. But the road to success has been anything but smooth. Aaron has faced seasons of darkness that tested his faith and resolve. Through it all, he has learned invaluable lessons about identity, discipleship, and what it truly means to be successful in God's eyes. Today, Aaron continues to create timeless, faith-filled, family-friendly adventures that inspire audiences around the world. His producing credits include box office hits like War Room, Overcomer, and Courageous Legacy. And his latest project, a biopic about the Hollywood legend Jimmy Stewart, is already generating some buzz. But beyond the accolades and achievements, Aaron's heart is to be faithful in the little things, to be a hero to his wife and children, and leave a legacy of obedience and selfless concern for others. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and equipped to chase your own God-sized dreams as we dive into Aaron's story of unwavering faith, resilience, and purpose-driven filmmaking. You won't want to miss a minute of this powerful conversation. Enjoy. All right, Aaron, welcome to The Beacon Show, where wisdom meets faith and success finds its voice. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm so happy to be. It's just a pleasure to connect with you and excited about what we have to discuss this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, you have accomplished so many things, and success means different things to different people, which we'll get into today. But what I would love to do before we talk about all the projects and what's next for you is start at the very beginning. So can you take us back to childhood for Aaron? What kind of kid were you? I'm curious. Introvert, extrovert, what was life like for you growing up?
So I was, I like to say I grew up with a dad who told me stories every night and a mom who gave me good books to read. So my head was pumped full of storytelling and a love of adventure and a sense of timelessness from a little kid. I loved reading old stories and imagining and pretending that I lived in other worlds and creating worlds in my backyard and playing dress up and doing all of those kind of things with my cousins and my siblings and my friends. And also my parents had a deep faith in pointing me towards the truth of God's word from my childhood. So it's something that I'm very grateful to have those as kind of foundational influences in my heart. So if you're thinking of me as a little kid, imagine me running around the backyard with a cape and a sword, pretending to fight invisible dragons. That's who Aaron was as a little boy.
So cool. Now, as you were running around with your cape on, did you always know that foundational love of storytelling and going to other places in your mind, did you know that would turn into the work that you're doing today? or was that something that happened later?
Not at all. I remember as a kid always being intrigued when you'd hear the radio on, or you'd see a movie or see a speaker at a conference. How did they get to decide? Like, who gave them the ability to be the person who decides what we're talking about or what we're listening to or reading? Always fascinated with books and stories, and just wondering who gets to decide those things. But I grew up in Michigan. I still live here. I love it, with my wife and my 5 kids. But in Michigan, it's the standard business that everything revolves around is the auto industry. And it's always, we're working on the 2029 model, and it's parts per million, and everything's very organized. So if you're an
Yeah.
entrepreneur or you're a creative, it's kind of like, well, when are you going to put aside your dreams and get a real job is kind of the
Yeah.
general culture, at least kind of in my area. So I never thought that it'd be possible that you could make a career out of storytelling. It was really more just a flow out of the way I was raised and the things that were a passion to me, that me and my cousins started to make movies in our backyard. We had the big old VHS, camera, and filmed a short film and just fell in love with it. And over the years, we continued to just play, telling stories and dreaming dreams. Till I was in high school and early college, we said, "Hey, let's make a feature film." So we made a movie called Pendragon, which is kind of a slaughtering of a King Arthur story. And literally, took money that we had saved for college and, got scholarships or whatever, and pooled it together and donations from a few friends from church, and made this epic movie over a couple of years. And it came out in 2008, I think. So way back when. And all of a sudden, this adventure story that at its heart had a tale of following God's call on your life is in Christian bookstores, and it's on TV, and all of a sudden it's in 14 countries and 3 languages or 4 languages. And I'm just saying, this little kid from the Midwest, we can tell stories that influence the world. And we got letters back from a missionary family in the Philippines or wherever saying, "What are you guys going to make your next movie? Our kids loved it." And so that was happening in the background as I was going to school, and God had put some people into my life who were mentoring me and really discipling me and asking me the questions. "Aaron, your faith is becoming real to you. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to serve and love the God who loves you so much?" And I remember a college professor. I went to a Oakland University, a state school. I was studying entrepreneurial marketing, and he put up on the board what's called a unique space map. And so, the unique space map, you have to figure out for a startup business, how are you going to compete differently in order to be successful with your business? And you have to kind of create an imaginary business and sort it out from there. And as I was thinking about it, I realized that I already was doing this with my movie hobby in the background. So we're making adventure stories that would reach families, and would share, a message of faith. No one else was doing that. And at the time, movies that were appropriate for families were usually, cartoons or, just boring, cheesy tabletop dramas or something like that. So for me, kind of, it was forged in my heart, the impact and power that stories have, a love of creative storytelling, and then the possibility that you could do that as a ministry and a mission. And now, as I have my own kids, that's who our target audience is. I want to make it for other dads like myself who have kids, and you could sit down and watch a movie that you would enjoy and be inspired with your kids. So we've developed kind of a box that I say there's 4 words that form a box, that the projects I want to create flow through, and it's timeless, faith, family, and adventure. So as you put those 4 words together, then that's the projects that we aspire to tell.
Wow. So I'm curious. You pulled together money that was supposed to go to college. You got other people involved in it. Did you have any thought that it wasn't going to work, or were there any naysayers? Like, what was that like in real life? Like, it sounds cool now because it worked, but in the
Because it worked.
moment, how was it?
Yes. So I remember a number of things. My dad, who was a wonderful, godly man who poured into me over the years, was very good with spreadsheets, and he's a director at business and big auto companies and all this kind of stuff. He sat down with me and said, okay, let's take your ideas and like put them into a spreadsheet, and like let's see where reality lines up, where the rubber meets the road. And as you crunch the numbers and look at the stats and look at the odds, it didn't add up. It wasn't, it couldn't, there's no way that this could actually work. And I remember as we were sitting there looking at it, he said, well, you'll need, for it to all come together and for this to have a work, it needs a miracle. Like it's not going to be possible. So we printed off a little sign on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that said miracle happens here. And we put that up on the wall where we were working. And we said, look, we feel a vision and a passion, a calling to do this, but we also recognize that, a bunch of donations from some random people and the few pennies that we have saved up that we've pooled together, that's not how it works. It's not possible to do it. I remember another relative who sat me and my cousin down and told us, you guys got to stop before somebody gets hurt. Like, this is all cool when you're kids, but this is real life now. It's time for you to grow up and get real jobs. And I remember just thinking and processing and saying, God, if you want us to do it, then you will have to lead. And that was really the theme of that early film. That was the theme, following God's call in your life. So it was very interesting how even stumbling into it with a lot of ignorance and not knowing the industry, not knowing anything about it, God was gracious and taught me lessons along the way. So that film wound up actually paying back its very modest investment. Not every film does. And I've had a lot of failures along the way. And there's no such thing as a straight road from where you are to where you dream of going. But that's where, we could talk a lot more about all those things.
Yeah, I definitely want to go there. But before I do, I want to touch on one other thing that you talked about as you were talking about that early film, the people that mentored and discipled you. Looking back, how critical was having those people in your life to that, not only that early success, but the wins and helping you to navigate some of the quote unquote failures?
I think that discipleship and mentoring is probably the single most important factor in developing as a person. And you look at the Great Commission in Matthew 28, Jesus says, go into all the world and share my good news, making disciples. And what does it mean to actually have a discipleship relationship? Well, there's a movie coming out this August that I was a producer on. It's not my project. It's Stephen and Alex Kendrick's movie called The Forge, and it's all about discipleship. So I've had the privilege of helping them with 5 of their projects, I guess, over the years. And that the theme is discipleship. So you guys got to check it out and dive into it. There's a book that comes along with it that the Kendricks are writing. For me, I'm so passionate about the topic because of how formative it was in my life. And yesterday, the last 2 days, I was at a conference speaking. And as I was preparing my keynote, I was looking at all the things that God was telling me to share. And almost every single one of these truths that I'm taking out of scripture and sharing it with our audience, but the way they were forged in my heart was through another godly man who grabbed a hold of me and taught me these things. So as I look back, I have 4 or 5 men who started as disciple makers. The first one was a guy named Mike, who in college grabbed me and said, all right, Aaron, we're starting a student ministry and you're going to lead it. I'm like, what? No, I'm trying to get good grades and work on my movie. It's like, doesn't matter. You're doing this. And so he taught me how to teach. He taught me how to lead, how to strategically think and plan, how to work with volunteers, all these things that I didn't think I would need. And now I can see using those principles in my company and using those principles in my church. And then there was a businessman who wound up being an investor in our first movie that we lost all of, or in our second movie, we lost all of his money. He didn't get it. He got some of it back now. But at the time, like the movie was in bankruptcy. Our distributor went bankrupt, took all our revenues, major disaster. But Tim said, I am going to sit on your board of advisors and I am going to mentor you and disciple you. And he's walked with me over the last decade through many ups and downs, through that process of working together on something. And that's really what discipleship is. Discipleship isn't, let's read a book together. Let's do a Bible study together. Let's go to church together. Discipleship is, I want to invite you into my life and I want to work together with you. I want to help coach you on how you raise your family, on how you serve, on how you run your business, how you interact with your wife, how you interact with your neighbors. And that's what we see Jesus did with his 12 disciples. He didn't say, come listen to me lecture on occasion. He said, come live with me and serve others with me. Watch me doing that. And you learn, your growth is exponential, but rather than just hearing instruction, you're watching someone who is a generation ahead of you do those things. And so I enjoy doing that, for others as well in my life, and make that a passion to try to help pass what I've been taught onto the next generation. But if you are not discipling someone else and you're not being discipled, then you're failing the Great Commission. And that's like your number one job as a follower of Jesus. So would encourage you and all of your listeners, the person doesn't have to be in the discipline that you're pursuing. You don't have to have a best-selling author or a best-selling, box office hit filmmaker to disciple you. Look to someone who's following the Lord and living their life the way that you want to, and pray and humbly ask them, would you be willing to disciple me, and see what God does with that.
I love it. Relationships are so important. And I think a lot of times, it's easy to get isolated and kind of do things on your own, but it's through community, it's through relationships that we really grow into all that God wants us to be, because to your point, there's so much to learn and we need an example to learn it from. And that example that we're looking for is someone that's following Jesus.
Amen.
So thank you for illuminating that for us. I do want to talk about failure, though. You mentioned the second film, someone that you admired, looked up to, you lost, well, not you lost, the film lost all of his money. Walk us through the situation and how you as a leader processed that and figured out how to move forward.
So this will take a minute. It's a lot of processing those things. So let me first just give a definition of success that I have come to believe for myself. So as a filmmaker, there are public records of your quote unquote success. So one is, it's a website called IMDb, Internet Movie Database. So you can go on there, you can see all the movies I've made and all the movies I didn't make that other people did. You're like, oh, were you a part of that? No, I wasn't. Sorry, I wasn't invited to the party. It's like, oh, okay. So that's the public record of what you've done. Then there's Box Office Mojo, or the numbers that can show if your movie's had a theatrical release, which in the streaming era, it's a little bit different. But my last couple films have been streamings. But you can say, oh, wow, this is how much money you spent on your movie. This is how much it made. You lost a lot of money, or, oh, you made a lot of money. It's a public record. And then there's like Rotten Tomatoes and critic reviews. We think, this person spent 4 years on their life and the movie was dumb. So there's a public record of your work, which can be challenging. And you look at that and say, have I been successful or not? Well, as I look at scripture, the definition of success, as I look at each person, the lives they lived, and then you think of what Jesus told us, that as you finish your life, he's going to look you in the eye and he's going to say, I never knew you. The work you did was in vain, or he's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. And as I look at that, the definition that I've come to is that success is not measured by results, but it's measured by faithfulness. That success is not measured by results, it's measured by faithfulness. You look at a prophet like Jonah, right? God says, Jonah, go to the people of Nineveh. He says, I don't want to. And he crosses his arm and he pouts. And then he says, no, you're going to get stuck in the fish. You're going to happen to go to Nineveh. So finally, he begrudgingly comes in and he gives the worst message ever. No compassion, no grace. Right. God hates you unless you repent. You're all going to burn. And he goes and sits grumpily. And then people say, oh, no, we should all change our lives. And they accept his message. There's a massive revival, huge success. Has nothing to do with Jonah's message, right? He did a terrible job being a representative of God. But God is the one who used his message and blessed it. Then you have Jeremiah, who goes and he faithfully preaches and shares the love of God and encourages and exhorts, and there's almost no fruit from his ministry. Success is not necessarily measured by results, but it's measured by faithfulness. So when you have that mindset, it allows you to have more grace with yourself as you encounter failures. The other thing that is huge as a foundational principle is talking about identity. So if you haven't, you got to look into Ephesians 1 and 2. And if you are a follower of Jesus, Ephesians 1 and 2 is the description of who you are. And it says that you have been chosen, you've been called, you've been given a purpose, you are adopted into God's family, you are forgiven, you're redeemed, and the list goes on and on of who you are. Conclusion is you are a son or a daughter of the King of the universe who's been given a position of authority. And even as you get into Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, by grace we've been saved through faith. It's a gift, not our own works. And then Ephesians 2:10 says, so we can do the good works that he set up in advance for us to do. And I think it as creatives and visionaries, to know that God has things he wants you to do and he's laid out in advance for you to do is so encouraging and so inspiring. So on your worst day, when your movie fails, when you fail, when it is your fault, sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's not, you can stand and say, my identity is not in what I've done. My identity is that I am the son of the King, and I can walk in confidence in his beloved son and the worth that he gives me. That scrapes you off the floor. But then it also scrapes you off the ceiling when you're wildly successful, when you sign the movie deal and Sony has a check coming your way to go make the movie that you've been dreaming of making. You are nothing. You are just, it's not your own strength and grace that's done it. You're just the son of God. That's who you are on your best day and your worst day. And having that identity squared up from the beginning allows you to be free to explore the good works that God has laid out in advance for you to do. So anyway, sorry for the little
no, that's good. Lots of wisdom there.
So with this project, it's a movie called Beyond the Mask. It's a super fun movie. It's set in like the time of the American Revolution. And it's just a great story about redemption and what do I have to do to make myself okay? Well, how can I be good enough to earn love, basically, is the story. It's about an assassin who worked for the British East India Company and then comes over and tries to, all this fun behind the scenes thing. So check it out. Wonderful movie that we went out and we raised, a significant, at least for us at the time, production budget to finance the film. And I know very clearly that God called us to do the movie. And he miraculously showed up in the funding of it. We had until June 15th in our, LLC paperwork to get the funds raised. And we were like hundreds of thousands of dollars short, had no money in the bank a few months out. And then as we got closer, we had a number of investors come in for our break escrow. But Monday morning, deadlines on Friday, we still were $150,000 short, which for a couple of recent college grads, that's like the difference between here and $1 billion. It's coming from
might as well be $1 billion, huh?
might as well be $1 billion. It's not happening. So we're saying, okay, well, I guess, God doesn't want it to happen. It's time to let it go. And then that evening, a guy had emailed 6 months before out of the blue, hey, let's grab coffee. And he's like, I'm in for $50,000. Okay. Then 2 other guys randomly on Wednesday and Thursday come in for 50. Now we're just 50,000 short, which is still an astronomical sum of money. When a family from my church and then a family from my cousin's church both invite us out to dinner, not thinking, okay, these guys aren't going to invest in our movie. They're like, we'd like to invest. So on Friday, June 15th, the exact penny of the amount of money we need to make the movie comes in. So it's like, okay, I know that Hudson Taylor and all these guys in the past, talk about God's miraculous provision. This just happened, has nothing to do with me. Like, this isn't me. I hustled as hard as I could for months. Nothing came of it. But the Lord said, I want to show you that I am in control and that I am leading this. So knowing that God leads you into it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And it doesn't mean that everything's going to go smoothly. But when you know that he is in it, you know that he will be with you as you're fighting your battles. And that's the promise that he gives. Whenever you look at the commands through all of scripture that say, do not fear, don't be afraid, there's always a second line associated with it. So Joshua, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, because I am going with you. Psalm 20:23 says, even though I walk in the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. So when you know that God is with you, that is what allows us to obey his command to don't worry, don't fear. So we walk into the project, the production goes well, it finishes well, we have a beautiful little film. And then we enter the distribution phase, and things start to go a little bonkers. We had a theatrical distribution deal for these one night screening events. And that distributor wasn't able to keep up with the demand that our film generated and started dropping the ball with things. And then we wound up, some consultants set us up with a distribution deal for what's called the home entertainment, all the DVDs and all the streaming rights and things, with a company that wound up going bankrupt. And they took all of the revenue for the film and sucked it down this bankruptcy hole. So all the money that would have gone to pay back our investors went down the toilet with this company. And, we look in our contract and it says, if there's a bankruptcy, then we get the movie back. And they said, oh, well, according to California law, that doesn't matter. They're keeping it anyway. So it just completely cratered and completely tanked our opportunity to return the money to these investors. And these were, like I said, people from my church, people in my family, good friends and mentors over the years who came in and invested in our project. So that is a devastating and challenging thing. And of course, you ask the questions, God, what are you doing? Why did you allow this to happen? And I honestly don't have answers to those questions. God has not given me clarity on those things. But what he has helped me to do over a long period of pain and suffering and trauma, walking through that, is to learn the lessons about fear and to learn the lessons about trusting in his sovereign hand. I'll share two other verses and thoughts real quick. So Psalm 73 says, my flesh and my heart may fail, but you are the strength of my heart and my portion forevermore. We were chatting earlier about the loss of your mom recently, and just shortly after our film kind of went bankrupt, and my father was diagnosed with colon cancer, and another project that I was trying to do failed, and I just entered this really rough, dark season in my life. And at the time, there was so much stress and so much churn in my heart that I wasn't able to sleep at night. So physically, my mind was racing so fast, my heart was pumping so fast. For most of the nights a week, I just couldn't sleep. And up to this point in my life, I'd always been able to count on myself. Like, I'm a, smart guy. I can figure this out. And even if other people fail me, I can come in and save the day because, I can count on me. My flesh was failing me and my heart was failing me. And you're lying there up awake all night, not able to sleep, and saying, I have things I have to do tomorrow. And if my mind is totally fried from being unable to sleep, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. And I literally have no answers. There's nothing I can do. And in that moment, when God meets you and he becomes the strength of your heart and your portion, it is extremely humbling. But then the faith that it builds that, okay, I don't want to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I don't want to do this. But if I do, I know that he will be with me. So fear is looking into the future, but imagining that the worst will happen and then believing that God won't be there with you. But faith is looking in the future saying, okay, probably the worst isn't going to happen. But even if it does, I know that God will be there with me. And if my flesh fails and my heart fails, I know that he is the strength of my heart and my portion forevermore. Even if I never get to make another movie, even if I never get to do another project, even if my investors and my friends all hate me, the Lord is my portion. And that is the foundation then that you can start to rebuild from. So anyway, a long answer to a short question, but
no, it's a great answer. And as you were sharing towards the end, it reminded me of the three Hebrew boys. Like, God is well able to rescue us, but even if he doesn't, it's not gonna change. Those are hard. Sometimes it's a hard thing to get to that place. But I believe that ultimately that's a part of success too, right? Is being able to get to a place in God that it's not all wrapped up in these
Mhm.
external trappings of success
Yep.
and God being enough. And the experiences that we go through to get to that place are some of the hardest ones of our life. But on the other side of that, I mean, I can only imagine as you eventually came out of that dark place, you were a different person than you
Mhm.
were going into those.
Yes. One of my mentors, as I was talking him through what happened, he got this like happy, evil grin on his face. And I'm like, Eric, you shouldn't like this is not a happy story. Like
Right.
you can't be like happy now. And he said, but the man that God is forging through these trials is going to be so much stronger than the man who's sitting here right now
Mm,
talking to me. Um, and it's painful, but it's true.
mm,
It's painful. I would never ask for trials. I try not to live my life in fear of the next thing that's coming, the next trial that God has, but you trust him with it. But God does, as he promised, use the forge of suffering to
yeah.
shape us more like him, and to strengthen us and really prepare us to be the people that he wants us to be. And through that strength, then to continue pressing on to where he's called you to go.
Mm. Amen. Amen. You know, the word forge just seems to roll off of your tongue right now. So let's talk a little bit about the Forge project. I know it's one that you're excited about because it ties into some personal values for you. And we want to make sure that our listening audience goes out and supports the film, but also is blessed by it. Talk to us a little bit more about that film and why it's so meaningful for the broader Christian community to really grab a hold of it.
Yeah, so I've been privileged to get to work with Stephen and Alex Kendrick since 2014 on their movie War Room, which you say War Room is a movie about an old lady's prayer closet. Like I got the first pitch and I'm like, guys, I mean, my movies are, timeless faith, family, adventure. Like I'm not gonna, I mean, hey, I'll help you with whatever you need help with. I'm what, but an old lady's prayer closet is like,
I don't know if this fits, right?
Right. So I stepped in to serve them on that movie, and God turned it into a movement, and turned it into just a revival in people's hearts of seeing the importance of prayer, putting him first and having a prayer strategy in your life, and that dramatically impacted me. Not just the story of the film, but being discipled by Steven as we made that movie and as we did other films together. So Steven has been pouring into me for the last, decade, I guess, discipling me and working together. And, back on War Room, we're sitting there. Okay. I got my list of 21 interns that we have to hire for the project. I've got this budget here. I've got this schedule, this spreadsheet, lay it all out. And he says, okay, let's talk about parenting. I'm like, I'm sorry. I thought we were going to talk about budgets. He says, okay. So
Right now.
yeah, so when you're disciplining your children, I'm like, what is happening? And he just took the time to,
Hmm.
while we're working together, to forge me. And so then when he said, Aaron, we want to make a movie about discipleship, and it's kind of a sequel in a way to their War Room story.
Yeah.
Said, hey, I'm here to serve you however you guys want. So we filmed that movie last summer. We're finishing post-production now. It'll be out in August. But really, it's a very simple story that illustrates, that teaches what does it look like to disciple. And it's a
Mm,
story of a young man who's um, discipled by an older man. It's like the simplest thing on earth,
mm,
just like War Room was, but it practically shows you how to do it and will
mm.
inspire you to obey the Great Commission and to go out and make disciples and to seek discipleship for yourself.
Yes, yes, yes. So we'll make sure that our viewing and listening audience is able to keep up with the film and is there when it officially hits studios. Let's talk about the James Stewart project that you're working on now.
Yes, thank you.
What made you say yes to this? I was reading about the goal of the project. It sounds like family is cooperative, which is always a good thing, so you can get that true perspective on what their life was like. But
Yes.
where did the idea to go with this particular project come from?
So of course I've seen It's a Wonderful Life growing up. It's a timeless Christmas movie that we watched a number of times and really enjoyed. And then I saw Jimmy Stewart's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I loved it. And remember watching The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, the Western, with my dad and things. So I always loved him as an actor. But, usually the backstories behind actors, when you dig around, you're not going to find anything worth repeating if we're honest. But I saw a news article or a history article that said Jimmy Stewart was a veteran and that he served his country in World War II, not just as a showpiece. We said, shooting recruiting videos, but he actually disdained that. He enlisted, was a private pilot before the war, and said, I want to serve my country. I want to serve my fellow citizens. And he saw the evil of Nazi Germany, wanted to do something about it personally. So he rose through the ranks in the Army Air Corps, became a squadron commander, was leading thousands of men in combat, leading the precision daylight bombing runs that prepared for the Allies' invasion of Normandy and ultimately won the war. And I just was amazed at this, that this man's story. Immediately after coming back from the war, the next movie he made was It's a Wonderful Life. And I thought, that's really interesting. Turns out the stress and strain that he took on himself to lead these men, we call it now post-traumatic stress disorder. They called it flak happy back then, because the flak is the shells that are bursting around and shooting airplanes down. He had missions where he'd be flying, and dozens of men are killed, or when he's planning a mission from the ground, he sends out 28 planes, and a dozen of them don't come back. And to have to live with that and internalize that and motivate your men the next morning to get up and go again. He was losing weight. He's going gray. He's going deaf in 1 year. And he comes back to Hollywood after the war. He's a shell of his former self. MGM doesn't want to renew his contract. He gets one offer to make a movie called Jimmy's War, where he could be a bomber pilot. He's like, I can't do that. So I was intrigued by all these things, but I guess the piece that sold it for me in wanting to tell the story was hearing about Jimmy's dad. So Jimmy, his dad was a strong man of faith, who was a Presbyterian deacon in Nowheresville, Pennsylvania. Jimmy gets the offer from Hollywood and goes off, and he's winning Oscars and doing all these things, but his dad's praying for him. And one of the main reasons that Jimmy chose to leave Tinseltown behind and go to serve his country is his father's influence in his life. And he wanted to win his dad's approval. And he knew being a fake artificial movie star and living the movie star lifestyle was not going to earn him his approval from his dad, who is judging him from God's standards. And so as Jimmy prepares to take off to go fight against Hitler in Europe, his dad flies out to meet him at the Air Force Base, hugs him, blesses him, looks him in the eye, tells him, I love you, and puts a letter in his pocket, said, read this when you're in the air. And in that letter is a blessing and a prayer and a copy of Psalm 91. And Jimmy said that he read that and was studying it and praying it throughout the war. And he believes that it's his father's prayers who sustained him through that conflict. And when he came back, a broken man, his friend Frank Capra reaches out to him and says, Jimmy, I've got a project for you. It is a Christmas movie about a suicidal dad and an angel. And I want you to play a suicidal father. It's like, that's as bad a pitch as War Room, right? So Jimmy, reluctantly agrees, and as we'll tell it in our story, through his father's encouragement, seeing how he can take the things he believes and integrate those with his desire to be someone real who serves others, and to make this story to bring healing to his country. And in the process of making the movie, Jimmy writes that scene where he's praying. The movie opens with prayer, and it's laid throughout the story of this angel and what God is doing to answer his prayers. It became real for him, and he says that God met him in the moment on set as he's in there, and that was the beginning of his healing from PTSD. And you see, in talking to Jimmy's daughter Kelly, she talks about what a great dad he was, and his relationship with his wife, who he met and married, and they're together for 45 years till she passed away. And, he adopted her two daughters, or her two sons, and then they had twin daughters, and just what a wonderful and amazing man he became, and the transformative power of these experiences and the character that they forged, and that influence of a father's prayer in his life. So I saw all these pieces and I said, I can't believe I never knew this backstory. And talking to Kelly about it, she was asking me, why do you want to make this movie? Does this story matter anymore? It's an older story. It's a black and white story, if you will. And I said, well, the reason I want to do it is because if I want my kids to know about who Jimmy Stewart was, and I want my boys to grow up to be men of citizens and men of courage, who sacrifice themselves for others, like Jimmy did. So that was my inspiration for the movie, and we'll be excited to see where it goes from here.
See where it comes. When do we think that the movie will hit the theaters?
So we're still filmmaking is a long process. So we're still on mile 2 of a triathlon, as it were, with writing, working on the script and working on the historical research and, talking. We have a number of studios who are interested in financing it. So talking through all of those options. So we will keep you posted.
Yeah, absolutely. So that means that you're going to have to come back and keep us updated on how things go. Time has flown. It's amazing. You're wonderful to talk to. Let's talk about our final thing, legacy. You were talking just now about, and actually a couple of times through our interview, about your kids and how important they are, how important your relationship with your wife is. Talk to us about legacy. What is the legacy when all is said and done, Aaron, that you would like to leave behind?
So I think if you are not a hero at home and a hero to the people who are the closest to you, then you have failed. And so if people remember you for the big things that you accomplished for God, oh wow, that's so cool. Look at all these wonderful things you did. But you have failed in the responsibilities that he's given you. I think of it this way, that God calls us to do big things, but he never calls us to disobey in order to accomplish a goal.
That's
And
good.
so for me, I would love to leave a legacy that I was faithful in the little things in my community and faithful to my wife and to my children and doing that. And that's hard. It is hard to do. It is very hard to be faithful in those small things. But that would be my number one goal. And if we can, one of the 4 words that I have is timeless. I aspire to tell timeless stories. And it would be amazing. Like It's a Wonderful Life, I consider to be a timeless story that, 50 years, 80 years, 100 years after that movie's made, people are going back and watching it and considering it for the truth that it has about humanity and about faith and about what does it mean to be a good person. Let me read this quote from Jimmy Stewart, and he's describing It's a Wonderful Life. He said, "It's simply about an ordinary man who discovers that living each ordinary day honorably with faith in God and a selfless concern for others can make for a truly wonderful life." And I found that to be so profound about what a wonderful life is. So I would say that would be my goal, is to finish well in the things that matter. And if God allows, to leave some timeless stories behind for future generations to follow.
Wow. So much wisdom in what you have shared with us today, Aaron. Thank you so much for being here. And it's official. You have to come back because there's so much that we didn't get to that will be a blessing to the audience. But in the meantime, wish you God's best in all of the projects that you're currently working on and what is to come. And we'll make sure that our listening audience is able to keep up and to support and to be blessed by the work that God has called you to do. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. God bless you.